Hi everyone, I'm Beth Blackerby and I've been teaching violin for well over 30 years. I have an online learning platform for beginning violinists. It's called violinlab.com. It's my baby. I've spent thousands of hours for over 10 years really making it a complete comprehensive curriculum. So I might reference it a couple times in the course of this video. But the purpose of this video is to give you what I think is really the most important things you need to know to start playing the instrument and things that will save you an enormous amount of time. Also, things that I wish I had known back when I first started playing. Things that I found out in the course of my career that would have been so helpful had I just known them or done them in the beginning stages of learning. So I do want to start with the violin. If you already have a violin, skip to number 2, but if you don't, then let me just tell you a couple important things about finding a violin. So by far and away, the most important thing to consider when you're looking for an instrument is getting one that is well set up. Okay, when I say set up, I'm talking about the bridge, strings, fine tuners, pegs. Having an excellent setup will make the instrument playable. You could get a really expensive violin in terms of wood quality and craftsmanship, and if it's poorly set up, it's going to be really difficult to play. Instruments that are not well set up can cause strain in the arm. You can get tendonitis because the bridge is too high. These bridges come in blanks. They are not original, they're not carved to fit the instrument. So a shop or a company that imports instruments has to fit bridges exactly to instruments. So that is something to really make sure of. And if you're on a budget and you can only afford a really cheap violin, the problem is that these cheap violins usually also come very cheaply set up, and then you end up having to pay more to have it set up well. I highly recommend, if there is a professional string instrument shop in your area or even near you, even a 2-hour drive, it's worth finding a local dealer, because then you have quality assurance, you have guarantees, you can build a rapport with the store owners. So there is so much merit in trying to do all your violin buying and renting locally first if you can. So tip number 2 also has to do with setup, but not setup in terms of bridge, strings, pegs, fine tuners, but the equipment that you use to hold the violin. So most people have a chin rest and a shoulder pad, and the standard chin rest and shoulder pad that comes with most beginning violin outfits is going to work for most of you. But for those of you who are not finding comfort, okay, this tip is for you. First of all, don't waste a lot of time watching videos with people's recommendations for what type of shoulder pad to use, or whether to use a shoulder pad or not use a shoulder pad, because this is the truth. Whatever works for one person is not necessarily going to work for anyone else. We are all built differently. I wish there was just one piece of advice. I would love it if there was one perfect setup that worked for everyone. Unfortunately, there isn't, which is why there are all kinds of styles of chin rests, all kinds of styles of shoulder pads. It's because we're all built differently. So I just encourage you to keep trying and keep finding something that is going to make it comfortable, secure, and to keep good posture. So I want you to take a look at a picture really quick. Actually, it's not a picture, it's an old newspaper clipping. This is me playing in youth orchestra. Now look at this abysmal posture. What I didn't know then is how important it is to have good posture when playing. Had I known that, or had I known how much trouble I would have with my sore neck muscles, I probably would have paid a lot closer attention. So if you just at least adhere to these basic principles, and as you're trying different kinds of shoulder pads or different kinds of chin rests, you can see if it sort of meets this criteria. So 1, you want to be able to keep your head over your spine, your shoulders down. So essentially you want to be like this when you play, with your head slightly turned and slightly lowered. Okay, this is it. So when I put my violin up here, my shoulders are relaxed, my head is straight, slightly turned and slightly lowered. I do not feel like my violin is going to fall. It feels very secure, and it's comfortable. I mean, I could stand like this for a good amount of time. I don't think I could talk easily like this, but I can play for quite a while and not feel any discomfort. So don't be afraid to life hack. Now, I will show you what I've done, and it's, as my children would say, this is just extra. But I bought gel pad shoe inserts, and I cut them up and I rubber banded them to each end of my shoulder pad so that it's really comfortable, so that this middle part doesn't bother my collarbone. This chin rest, I had the maker add some wood to make it a little bit higher. You know, we carved out some more down in here to make a bigger lip so it kind of fits my jaw better. So you can see I've spared no expense. I've tried everything because it is a worthy pursuit. All right, so security, comfort, and good posture. That's what you're shooting for. So my next tip is to really understand the role of friction in violin playing. Just imagine that it's a game, the game of friction. And if you know the basic rules, you can win. You can win at this game. And winning means that you're going to play some really beautiful sounds. And you're also going to be able to know how to make something sound better. Or when something doesn't sound great, you'll know why and you'll know what to do. So the goal of moving the bow across the strings is to get a clear, fundamental tone. And what I mean by fundamental is the actual sound of the tone or note that you're trying to get. So that's my open D. D is the fundamental. Okay, that's a G. G is the fundamental. Okay, now sometimes something goes wrong, user error, and we don't get that fundamental. That means the whole string is not vibrating back and forth. So you might hear something like this. Okay, well, that was not a clear fundamental. What you were hearing are partials or harmonics, just parts of that string were vibrating. So we have to know how to get this clear fundamental sound, okay? Now, we can also hear other things like, okay? That's not a clear fundamental. In this case, I was getting a lot of extra bow noise, okay? So you heard these scratches. So scratches and scrapes, okay, that's just bow noise. This, okay, those are harmonics. So let's just talk a little bit about ideal friction. Okay, already you know, because I'm sure you've already watched many videos, and people say, well, you know, the bow needs to move perpendicular to the strings, right? Because there are these little microfibers on the horsehair, and they grab the string, and then they let go, and they grab and let go. And the best way to get a string that's attached from here to here to vibrate is to pull it in this direction, okay? That's the best use of energy. So we pull it, and then it vibrates back and forth. So yes, ideally, we move the bow perpendicular to the strings, but if you watch a lot of violinists, you're going to notice something. You're going to notice that the bow does not always move perpendicular to the strings, and you still hear beautiful sounds. Well, that's because it is true. I don't have to move the bow completely perpendicular to get a clear fundamental. Okay, it's just clearer if it is moving perpendicular. Also, at that speed, it doesn't take a lot of energy to keep a vibrating string in motion. It's when we start having to change the bow direction rapidly. That's when So if my bow isn't moving perpendicular to the strings, okay, that's when it really matters, because when the bow has to change direction, the string stops. It has to be grabbed again and pulled the other direction. And then when the bow moves the opposite way, the string is stopped and pulled the other way. So we have to really grab. That's when it really matters that the bow is moving perpendicular to the strings. Okay, so that's how we get the friction, all right? Then we have to control it, and we have to control the consistency of friction, and things can get in the way of that. So let's say I'm pulling the bow across the strings and something interrupts this flow of friction, like tension. If my bow hold is too tight, then something is preventing the engagement of the bow hair and the violin strings. It's preventing the hair from grabbing. Listen to that bounce. That's because the tension in my fingers is preventing the bow from having enough weight to produce a nice, steady, even grab the whole length of the bow. Okay, so that is an interruption, and we notice that. Or let's say that my bow speed changes abruptly and it's moving too slow. Well, there's not enough speed for those little fibers to really pull and let go. So the vibrations are being squelched, are being inhibited. So we want a nice steady flow, and we want consistency. Okay, and then we have to control the amount of friction. So if you understand these next two very, very basic principles, okay, you're gonna get the whole thing. Okay, so even some advanced players aren't fully aware of this. You have the string. The string is suspended at two ends. All right, it's being attached here at the nut, and it is being stopped here at the bridge. The points where they are attached, okay, we call the highest areas of tension, and you can feel this yourself. Try to push the string down right close to the bridge. Okay, I'm trying to push this D string, and I cannot apply enough force that would actually get the string to touch the fingerboard. However, if I push that string down right here, it's much floppier, there's less tension, I can easily push it down. So when I am bowing, I have to consider the areas of tension. If I have a lot of bow pressure, a lot of weight, a lot of force, and I'm in an area where there's not much tension on the string and it's easy to push down, okay, I'm going to get this ugly, scratchy sound because there's just too much weight. There's just not enough tension on the string, and it's not being allowed to vibrate. So if I take that same amount of force and I put it up here next to the bridge where there is a lot of tension, and it does require a lot of force just to get it to move, just to get it to bend, it's just fine. Okay, now let's flip that. Okay, so that's one end of the spectrum right here where I have a lot of weight, and I'm matching that to the part of the string where there's the most amount of tension. All right, now I have just a little bit of weight, just very lightweight, feather weight, hardly any weight, just beyond what the weight of the bow is. And I'm near the bridge. Well, there's just not enough power, there's not enough force, there's not enough friction being made because I'm not getting the string to move. There's just too much tension. It's hard to move the string back and forth right up here near the bridge. So if I were to take this light weight and then go to the area where it's really easy to move the string back and forth, no problem. Okay, so you have these two ends of this gamut, okay, and then everything in between. You can have a medium amount of pressure, a medium amount. And if I take a medium amount of pressure and I put it, and I'm bowing in the area where there's the weak tension where the string is just really floppy. It's not great. I'm going to put it up here where there's a lot of tension. There's a little bit of that harmonic sound where the hair wasn't grabbing all that well, but right in the middle with a medium amount of weight, I can be kind of right smack in the middle. And it's pretty perfect. So just knowing those basic things is going to help you get yourself out of sticky situations. It's going to help you find the ideal friction for the context of the music. So let's say that you want to have a really soft sound. Well, what are you going to do? Are you going to play up where it's really hard to move the string? Because you don't want a lot of weight, you don't want a lot of force. No, if you want to play really softly, then you can move a little bit down, a little bit closer to the fingerboard, and you can have a lighter weight and move the bow fast. Okay? Understanding these just basic laws of physics and the physics of playing the violin really can deepen just your own understanding of your technique, and then you'll be able to identify when something is not sounding wonderful, and you can experiment with bow speed, bow placement. So when I was talking about playing close to the fingerboard or the bridge, I'm talking about bow placement. Sometimes we call this the sounding point, which is the spot in between the fingerboard and the bridge where we're bowing. So I hope you already know a lot more than you just did. Now, my next tip has to do with practicing. And I know you already know that you have to practice to get good. And I know that you already know that quality practice is the key. And when I ask my colleagues, when I ask them the question, well, what do you wish you could go back and tell your, beginning self, your 8-year-old self or your 12-year-old self? And the number one answer was how to practice. So in that vein, what I want you to remember is this: don't put off perfection. Now, perfection is a relative term. If you are just beginning, you're not going to sound like a perfect player. You're not going to sound like Hilary Hahn. We know that. But my point is don't create a hierarchy of learning. That's what I did for years and years and years and years. I first would say, well, I need to learn my notes. I need to learn where I place the fingers. Does the finger go here? Does the finger go there? And then after that, I would give some attention to making sure that I was playing the right rhythms. If I wasn't holding certain notes not quite long enough, that was okay. I would go back and take care of that later. And then I would maybe pay attention to, after my teacher commented several times, on playing the right bowings. Am I supposed to be up bow on that, or was I supposed to be down bow? Because, it didn't seem to really make that much difference. And then much later, when I thought I had learned the notes, then I would say, okay, well, I guess I'm supposed to make this musical, so I guess I can put in some crescendos or decrescendos. And then maybe finally I would go about really trying to get it more in tune or to try to polish it. So that's usually how most students practice. They kind of learn these things in steps, and then they get to the polishing phase. Well, my advice to you is don't make a hierarchy. Don't have phases of learning. You're going to polish from the very beginning. But you might think, well, I'm just starting out. I can't think about if my bow is up or down, or if that's the right rhythm, or if my notes are in the right place, or it's in tune. I can't think of all those things at once. You can, but it just means that you have to go slow and do a little bit at a time. So even if you accomplish all those things in one measure, that's a huge accomplishment, because then you're not wasting time. And when I say waste time, I'm not talking about literally just kind of wasting time. I mean wasting neurons on learning things incorrectly. That's the problem. When you put off the polishing till the end, what it really means is you have spent an enormous amount of time playing a lot of things wrong, playing a lot of bowings wrong, playing a lot of articulations incorrectly. So by bringing everything together right from the start, you will progress way faster because your brain is spending all that time learning things correctly. So I wish I had made this up, but I read it somewhere and it said, the best way to play in tune is to never play out of tune. And you know, that's stating the obvious. But if you think about it, it's really profound. It's like, well, okay, then how am I never going to play out of tune? Then you start to think, well, what does it take? What does that look like? So recently, with myself as with students, before they have ever touched their finger to a note for the first time, let's say you are just learning a brand new song, it could be an easy song. So that's a song I have on Violin Lab. Before your finger ever touches a single note, have a drone going. This is something I really couldn't have done for myself back in the day, and that is the advantage of studying the violin now when you have all kinds of tools and resources available. So now there's an app, and this app is called TE Tuner, and I can put my app on a drone. So I'm going to put it on G. Okay, so now the first time I put my finger to that note, let's imagine that I'm a beginning player and I'm learning this for the very first time. So the very first note, I'm going to match. Now, I don't know if you can hear it, but I'm matching that note. Okay, before I go on, I'm going to observe the bow direction. I'm going to observe my bow placement. I'm going to listen to my tone. I'm going to check to see if everything is movable, if my arm is relaxed. Okay, is that the best I can do? And then I'll go to the next note. That's an open A, so my next note is this note. I'm going to tune it. So if I proceed in that way, if I'm careful and I expect perfection, that being a relative term, from the very first stages of learning, then I'm going to learn a lot faster. I have an entire course on Violin Lab about practicing, and it's essentially what the things I was showing you. It's how to go about learning a piece of music so thoroughly from the very get-go that you don't spend all this time, learning things incorrectly. Now, tip number 5 is something I really, really wish I had thought more about or even thought of when I was a student. And that is to treat focus like another muscle. So we tell our muscles what to do. We strengthen our muscles. We let our muscles relax. So think of focus in that same way. Get good at making focus movable, that you can mobilize it and take it to very specific places. So this is a good exercise. Just go around your body, and tell yourself to feel different parts of the body. So feel your right foot, feel your left foot, feel your left hand holding the violin like this. Feel your fingertips, feel the strings against your fingertips. Or you might say, okay, Feel my right thumb. Feel this joint right there to see if it's loose and relaxed. Or move to my shoulder. Is my shoulder relaxed? Okay, I'm going to move my attention now and my focus to how much bow I'm using. So the better I am at being able to be very specific with myself, with my focus muscle on where I want it to be flexing, the more information I'm going to gather, okay, into my brain. I'm going to be more aware of things, and the more aware I am, the more I'll be able to correct things, and the more I'll be able to assess what needs to be corrected or what needs to be worked on. So even at the very beginning stages, even when you are just playing your first notes, practice moving that focus muscle, practice flexing it. And you're going to feel, just tell yourself, I'm going to feel the spacing between my fingers. Tell yourself, I'm going to feel my left thumb. I'm going to feel where it is at all times. So being able to harness that focus is probably going to be one of your best assets for really productive practices. So tip number 6 is just bust through that obstacle of reading music if you are hesitant or if you are shy about learning it. Now, if you already know how to read music, go on to the next tip. But I want to tell all of you who do not read music yet, those who learn to read music or those who can read music progress much, much faster than those who don't. If you don't, you can only go so far by watching someone put their fingers down on the fingerboard or picking things out by ear. Your progress will cap off really quickly. When you can read music, it means you can actually experience and learn it faster. You can experience a wider variety of music. Therefore, your technique and your playing is just going to develop much better. So don't be hesitant. It's a logical system. I think for some of you, you may see that density on a page and you see those little dots and you think, there's just no way I can do this. I promise you, you can. It is easier than learning a spoken language, something like English, where there's all kinds of irregularities and some rules for this and some rules for that. But music, the rules are the rules. There are no exceptions, and it will never change. So it's a really beautiful, beautiful system. I encourage you to learn it. There are all kinds of books. I have a course on Violin Lab that will teach you everything you need to know about reading music, and you don't have to learn it at the same time that you're practicing. In fact, I recommend separating those things and learning the skill of playing first, learning how to get a good tone. So on Violin Lab, I have all kinds of exercises and pieces and instruction on just establishing a really beautiful sound before you would have to learn to read music. And then at the same time, you can be working on your note reading skills so that at some point you'll bring those things together. And then there is a world of music out there for you to explore. There are all kinds of websites with thousands and thousands of files of violin music. So it really does open up just an incredible world of music. So my next tip is to try to recognize good teaching. Okay, there are teachers and there are pedagogues. A pedagogue is someone who has thoroughly studied and thought and learned to teach well. Okay, so there are plenty of great players who teach, but they aren't necessarily great teachers. And sometimes it's hard to even know. It's hard to know if you have a good teacher. And I personally didn't know that I had a great teacher until I actually had one. And then, in retrospect, I realized that some of the other teachers I had were not great pedagogues. So here's some tips. Here's what makes a great pedagogue. Okay, first of all, whether you choose to study online or like on Violin Lab, or whether you are studying with a private teacher, you should walk away from the lesson, whether it's a video or whether it's an in-person session, feeling encouraged. If you don't feel encouraged, then that person has not conveyed the information well enough for you to understand it. Because when you understand what someone is telling you, then you're encouraged to go do it. So if you are looking for a private teacher, set up a trial lesson so you can see if their teaching style fits you. If you leave the lesson feeling encouraged, then likely they're a good teacher. Another sign of good teaching is, or of a pedagogue, is that person loves to answer questions. So when you ask a question, a violin playing related question, watch the face. If they get excited about talking about how to play, then you know they're a pedagogue. Because we pedagogues, we like to geek out when it comes to talking about violin technique. And when a student asks me a question about playing, I am so happy for it. I'm excited because I get to tell them, I get to teach them, they're going to listen to me. And so that's a good measure of whether someone is a good teacher or not. Sometimes if you ask a question and they're a little evasive or they feel a little uncomfortable, then it's because they really haven't thought it through and they don't really know what to tell you. And lastly, what they say when you ask a question, the answer should make sense. Okay, because really violin playing is a science. All right, that's the tagline of Violin Lab. The art and science of playing the violin. It's a science, and it's actually an exact science. Even beauty and artistry can be distilled into quantifiable principles. So if what someone tells you doesn't completely make sense, then again, they haven't thought it through. So I encourage you to find the best instruction. You will go so much faster. And for those of you who are trying to put together a good curriculum just watching random videos across YouTube, you will learn some things, I guarantee you, but there will also be big gaps in your progress. So I encourage you to get a really great online curriculum like Violin Lab, or find a really great teacher, or the combination. Everything must be able to move. And when I mean everything, I'm talking about joints. I'm talking about all of the joints that we use to play the violin. They are always in motion, all of them. Your shoulders, your elbows, wrists, fingers. And when one thing, even one little joint gets stiff, it will make other things also get tight. And tension, boy, that's the killer. Okay, that wrecks your technique. It also makes playing uncomfortable. So all the fingers have to be relaxed. The wrist has to be able to move. The elbow has to be able to move. The shoulder has to be able to move. And same with on our left side. And tension, it's like a virus. You get one thing is tense, it's going to spread to everything else. Well, there's also a mirroring effect with our bodies. So when we get tense on one side, it really just kind of transfers to the other side as well. Now, something I really wish I'd known and figured out way too late in life, and that was that when we use our back muscles to hold up our arms instead of these muscles, we automatically are going to have more relaxation in our playing. So I didn't ever really understand this. I never had thought about it until it was pointed out to me by a physical therapist. And she said, you can lift your arm just using the back muscles. You don't even have to engage these muscles at all. So I see this so much in people's playing, including my own. I still feel it, where I'm using these muscles too much to hold up the arm. And when I let go of those and use the back muscles, imagine that the arms are just kind of hooked in back here. The shoulder blade just hooks into the back, and they're just suspended with those muscles back there. everything automatically is looser, is less tense, and your tone is just also the tone is instantly bigger, instantly more rich. So start with that. If anything, just tune into how you are holding up your arms when you play. Use those back muscles, and already you'll set yourself up to being able to play with more relaxation. And then also learning how to identify tension and finding someone who can help you identify where there's too much tension in your playing. So relaxation. I just want to let you know that in appreciation for your sticking with me and listening to all of this video, because I know it's a long one, I want to do something for you. I didn't announce it at the beginning of the video, sort of a contest, and you've won. I'd like to give you a free pass to Violin Lab to try out. It'll be for a limited amount of time, but no strings attached. I of course hope that you love it and want to join, but you don't have to. But I would like to share my work with you, and hopefully that'll help you on your journey. So all you need to do is to email me at violinlab@gmail.com. My name's Beth. And in the subject line, put, I have a long attention span. Okay? So congratulations on your long attention span, because that means you have what it takes to learn the violin. So congratulations. And I actually hope to see you someday on Violin Lab.